we got incredibly interesting results. We have a number of sequences belonging to people coming from the Middle East area.
Wow.
The face on the Turin Shroud is famous, but the DNA inside the threads is the real story now. Experts are looking at the genetic signatures of plants and humans that have touched the cloth since the beginning.
One of the mitochondrial type belongs to a very rare ethnical group, which is called Druze. We got many copies of this sequence and type of DNA in the shroud.
So here's the deal. The science shows that this cloth was in the Middle East long before it showed up in Europe. This fact breaks the old idea that it was just a smart fake from France. Hands down, this is the most studied object in history, and it still has the power to scare the people who study it for a living. Human history, written in ancient blood. An image like no other has inspired people for a long time and created a huge debate. The Shroud of Turin is a piece of history that stays a puzzle for science. This burial cloth is printed with what many believe is the real image of a man after his time on the cross. It has been talked about for a long time, but now the shroud is back in the news in a big way. Deep inside the old fibers, scientists found something amazing. They found DNA. When they checked it, the team was left without words. For millions of people, this is the only physical trace of the resurrection. It is a silent witness that speaks through biology rather than words. Skeptics see it differently. They think it is a very smart fake from the Middle Ages. Some say a famous artist like Leonardo da Vinci made it, while others think an unknown master created it to trick people looking for miracles. For more than 600 years, this fight has gone on. Faith is on one side and reason is on the other. But in the 21st century, the time of just guessing came to an end. Science entered the room feeling cold and tough. Technology made things possible that used to be impossible to even think about. Researchers stopped looking at the cloth as a holy icon and started looking at it as a crime scene. It is evidence in a case that has not been solved. They took the DNA from the fibers and used X-rays to scan every single thread. They broke the stains down into tiny molecules and atoms. They thought they would find simple answers like traces of one person or maybe some paint left by an artist. But what they found was not simple at all. The people checking the genes at the University of Padua found results that made even the best scientists feel shaky. The data did not just ask questions about the old ideas, it broke them completely. Both the doubters and the religious people saw their ideas fall apart. The shroud was no longer just a piece of cloth. It became a map. This map shows a journey that started 2,000 years ago. It is a record of pain that is so exact it cannot be made again by hand. It is also evidence of a huge burst of energy that modern physics still cannot explain. This is the start of the biggest forensic search ever done. We are following trails that the human eye cannot see. Tiny pollen grains and biological fingerprints are showing whose blood really touched these threads. The chemistry seems to shout about the suffering that happened. The physics behind the image itself is very strange. It works like a photo negative and a hologram at the same time. The DNA tests forced the experts to admit that this object was not made in Europe. It shows events that changed human history. Something about the hidden image on the cloth makes everyone wonder how it first appeared. Real face, hidden in the shadows. To understand why the new DNA findings are so shocking, we have to go back to the start. Modern study of the cloth began when people first saw the face hidden in the linen. That moment happened on May 28 in the year 1898 in the city of Turin. A man named Secondo Pia was allowed to take a photo of the cloth. At that time, taking photos was very hard. It was slow and very technical. Pia had to carry a camera the size of a suitcase up a tall ladder inside the dark church. He used bright flashes to get enough light. He made 2 large glass plates that were 20 by 24 inches. Late that night, he was alone in his dark room with only a small red light. He put one of the plates into the chemicals to develop the photo. As the image started to show up on the glass, he almost dropped the plate because he was so scared. What he saw did not feel real. On a normal photo negative, the light part should be dark and the dark part should be light. But on the shroud, it was different. When he looked at the negative, he saw a sharp and detailed positive image. He saw a face with deep eyes and a broken nose. He saw a man who had suffered a lot. For the first time, the man in the linen was not just a shadow. The face looked calm and strong, even though he had been through a lot of pain. This changed how everyone looked at the shroud. A normal drawing or painting does not work this way. If you take a photo of a painting, the negative looks strange and wrong, but the shroud looked like a real black and white photo of a living person. This fact is still impossible to ignore today. What we see on the cloth with our own eyes is already a negative. This brings up a question that seems impossible to answer. Who in the Middle Ages knew how photography worked? Who knew that light could be flipped to hide a secret image? The answer is that nobody knew. No one could make a perfect negative image without having a way to see if it worked. Photography was not invented for another 800 years. The human brain cannot even see the world in negative on its own. This was the first real mystery. The cloth did not act like a painting. It acted like a camera plate that caught one moment in time. Over many years, the cloth was checked with X-rays and lasers. But the biggest secret was not in the image. It was in the dirt and the dust trapped between the fibers for 2,000 years. The tiny grains of dust are now telling a story that spans across the entire planet. World map inside the fibers. In the year 2015, a group of experts was allowed to check the cloth for DNA. They wanted to find out where the cloth had been and who had touched it over hundreds of years. They used special tiny vacuums to pick up dust and pollen from deep inside the threads. This was very hard work because even a tiny bit of modern dirt could ruin the test. A single sneeze or a tiny piece of skin from a worker could hide the old signals. The samples went to a very clean lab where the testing began. They used a new way of checking DNA that looks at hundreds of copies in each cell. For many weeks, computers worked non-stop to read the code. When the final maps appeared, the researchers saw something that no one expected. It was not the DNA of just one person. It was a picture of many different people from all over the world. The results were printed in a famous science journal, and the reaction was huge. Scientists thought they would find mostly European DNA if the cloth was a fake from France. But they found a mess of different types of people. The cloth had genetic fingerprints from the Middle East and Western Europe. They found markers from a group of people called the Druze who live in places like Israel and Lebanon. This DNA is very old and has not changed much over time, which proves the cloth was in that area. They also found DNA from North and East Africa like Egypt and Ethiopia. This suggests that the cloth touched some of the very first Christian groups in Africa. Most amazing were the traces from India and China. How could DNA from China be on a cloth kept in Europe? In the Middle Ages, people did not travel across the world like we do now. A faker in a French church in the year 1350 would not have access to people from India or China. The answer is that the shroud is a traveler. The genetic map matches an old path called the Silk Road. For hundreds of years, the cloth was moved from city to city. It started in Jerusalem and went to a place called Edessa. Caravans with silk and spices passed through that city. People from all over the world came to see the cloth and they touched it or breathed near it. Each person left a tiny bit of DNA. Layer after layer, the history of the world grew on the cloth. It then went to Constantinople, which was the biggest city in the world at the time. Finally, it was taken to France and then to Italy. This biological record proves the cloth is very old and comes from the East. It is much better proof than any other test because you cannot fake DNA from 5 different continents. The plants trapped in the linen provide even more proof about the exact location of its origin. Thorns and dust of Jerusalem. The study of pollen is the second half of the story. 2 experts checked the tiny grains trapped in the cloth. They found pollen from 58 different types of plants. 17 of those plants are from Europe, which makes sense because the cloth has been there for 600 years. But most of the plants are from the Middle East and Turkey. They found one specific plant called gundia. This is a thorny desert bush. Its pollen was found in very high numbers near the head and shoulders of the image. This plant has long and sharp thorns. It is the kind of plant that soldiers would use to make a crown for someone they wanted to mock. This plant only grows in a small area near Jerusalem, and it blooms in the spring during the time of Passover. This matches the story of the man on the cross perfectly. A faker in France could not have found this specific pollen and put it on the cloth. You cannot paint with pollen. It acts like a stamp from a specific place. Then there is the blood. In the year 2017, experts looked at the red stains under a very powerful microscope. They saw that it was real human blood of the type AB. This is a rare blood type, but it is found on other old relics. The science showed that this was the blood of a man who had been through a lot of pain. They found tiny particles that only show up when muscles are badly hurt and the body is under extreme stress. This matches the story of the man being beaten with whips. An artist can paint a wound, but they cannot fake the chemistry of a body that is dying from trauma. Even the color of the blood is a clue. Normally, old blood turns brown or black, but the blood on the cloth is still red. This happens because high levels of a substance called bilirubin are released when the body is under a lot of stress. This preserves the red color for hundreds of years. This is not magic, but it is very rare biology. For a long time, people pointed to a test from the year 1988 that said the cloth was a fake from the Middle Ages. But new research shows that the test was wrong. The piece of cloth they used for that test was a patch made by nuns after a fire. They tested the repair and not the original cloth. The patch had cotton in it, but the real shroud is only made of linen. This was a huge mistake that led everyone to believe the cloth was a fake for 30 years. In the year 2022, a new test used X-rays to check the age of the linen fibers at an atomic level. This test does not care about dirt or patches. It showed that the shroud is actually 2,000 years old. It matches the cloth found in ancient fortresses in Israel from the time of Christ. Do you think science will ever fully explain this? Let us know in the comments. Please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. Would you like me to write a script for another mystery?